All right, we are live.
4 weeks. So we have like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, you in the library, Don?
Huh?
Are you in the library?
Yeah, I'm in the library right now. But all right. So I guess what was everybody's overall thoughts about the article that we read?
I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was just cool to get kind of a different perspective and idea of like just the definition of race. You know, we naturally just kind of think we have it figured out. Like we think we know what race is. Like you're a different race than me, but in reality, it's more just the attitude and the culture as opposed to the actual color of somebody's skin.
Right.
What we really mean by it. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. It's actually very true. There's actually a statement that I saw on like the second page where it was talking about that woman. Let me see. What was her name again? Hudgens v. Wright, I think.
Yeah, Hudgens versus Wright, that court case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about her court case and, you know, like how they were describing her and how they had like different secret like codes for how they handle things because of your race.
Yeah.
And so to me that was like super interesting because, you know, I always thought it was just like the color of your race, but it's not even only your color. It's like the type of hair you have, the kind of nose you have, your physical appearances, the culture, the way you talk, the way you act. And that's how they're going to prejudge you on how they handled her court case.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I played football in high school. And there was a football player that he considered himself a black kid. You know, his father was black and he came from a black family, but his skin, he was lighter complected than I was, you know. And so you look at him and you wouldn't necessarily just by the color of his skin, you know, think he was black, but as you looked at him you could tell he had, you know, the hair and he had the nose, and you know it was, and his, you know, his father's side, you know, was black. And so it's just interesting that it's not always, you know, like kind of like what the court case was talking about as well, and that, you know, his skin was lighter than mine is, but you know he considered himself African American.
Yeah. What was interesting as well that I thought was how the narrator was talking about him and his brother, and how they were different races. To them, that they're different races because he considers himself Latino, and his brother, what did his brother call himself again? Where is it at?
Anglo. He said the Anglo side of the family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like the third or the fourth page that he said something about his brother. But it was just interesting to see how, like, even though they're brothers, they consider themselves two different races just because of their views on how they view each other and their own lives.
Yeah. And kind of like you kind of think about the fourth question of our assignments. The fourth question of our assignment, it tells us how does this races thing affect our lives. Well, I grew up when Don shared about the same blood but different identities, they like to label themselves. When I grew up, there's a lot of fights, school fights in Tonga. there's a lot of school fights back in the country just because they label themselves out. This is green and that's red, and then they kind of get that from it's not something that just started up. It's something from way before them, just because they're used to it, because they're being labeled, oh, this is green. As soon as they see this color, green, automatically, I hate that. I just want to get rid of that. And when green sees red, it's automatically in their mind, and they're like, okay, I don't wanna see that. I just hate it just because of racism. And then that's how this racist issues can really affect people's lives. Not only them that have those issues, but families, environment, societies can affect it by it too. Because some families they're scared. They're scared for their kids. They're scared for their children attend any of those schools because they know how they can be beat up anytime just because of the colors of the dress, the colors of the attire they wear to the school. So that's why I was thinking about it.
And that's interesting too, because me growing up in California, there was always competition between different races as well. Like with me, I was in a very diverse high school where there's a lot of Latinos, there's a lot of whites, there was a lot of blacks, and there was a lot of Polynesians. And we all played on the football team together, and we all would make fun of each other for each of our weaknesses. Like for Tongans or for Polynesians, we were all very strong, very powerful, but we were like pretty slow. We were like the slowest out of the group. For the blacks, they were made fun of because they were so weak, but yet they were known for jumping so high. Being coordinated, jumping so high, being athletic. The whites were known for being smart, intelligent, and the Latinos were kind of like ones that were like, they were average, but they were hard workers. And so like we all like would make fun of each other for like our weaknesses and our strengths, and that's how we defined ourselves as different races. But I never realized that until I read this article. I always just thought about just different colors, and sometimes I would even mix myself with the colors with blacks and with Latinos, because we were all pretty similar in color. There were blacks that were lighter, that were pretty much the same as me. There were blacks that were lighter than me, but in the end, as I read this article, I noticed how much we separate ourselves, not just from our color, but from our attributes as well, and from our characteristics.
And I think, because I played football as well, and it was a very similar situation, but I think it's interesting in that, it's a perfect example of just how generalizations happen, because, traditionally, the African Americans are the ones that are quick and can jump high. But there was a white kid on my team that was faster than most of the black kids, and he could jump higher than most of them too, And
right.
And so there's all kinds of different exceptions to the rules that we put on things. And I think that just goes to show the point that the author was trying to make, in that, race is really something that we make up in our heads. It's kind of a social grouping as opposed to an actual biological grouping, because not every white kid is smart, and not every black kid can jump high. Right. It just, that's the generalization that we put as people.
Right. And it's interesting too, because of this article, it's made me realize how much more broad and general racism really is. It's not specific at all. Racism is something that can be picked off just from a topic like that, and it's there. So that to me was mind blowing, of like how general racism is. It opened my mind a lot.
So it's just said that to think about racism can create that slavery back then, because I remember reading one of the assignments, the poem, when we're summarizing the poem. There's one poem that says a Negro speaks of rivers, and I read this poem, and to my own understanding that the poem that the Negroes helped me to understand that the poem is like a genealogy, a tree to the poet, using the rivers as connection between the African Americans. And then he uses the rivers as a metaphors in the title, having Negro in it, helped me to understand that it's like a geology of slavery. And it doesn't use, it's funny because it doesn't uses the African Americans as the title. Instead of that, he uses the Negro, because how we know how when we label someone, we use that as a mocking. It's a mocking thing. Like blacks, is that we use blacks instead of African Americans. We use Negro. There's a different kind of a label that we can use to identify those kind of people that creates that. It's like whipping their back. So grabbing something that just whip that back is like, okay, you're a slave. If you were born a woman, if a woman was being a slave and you were born with a woman that was being a slave, you're a slave. So it creates like this a feeling inside, this feeling that you have this sympathy to just over people from other races, like me. It's kind of sad to think of while reading the poem and reading this article. And everything is just about differences. But if you want to take it to the religious side, there's a whole different thing. Everyone is on the same level, no matter how high your rank is, no matter how high your calling is. Everyone is on the same rank level.
Yeah, and same thing with that. A award. They can use those different, because they all have different talents. But they can use those together on that same level to work in harmony and to make good things happen. But I've also seen awards that they're different and they might think they're on different levels, and it doesn't quite work out the same way. Yeah. So I think it's the same principle with race, in that we all do have different talents, we do have different experiences, and if we come together and work together, then we can be able to have more perspective and more harmony. Whereas like we've seen throughout history, it can tear apart societies as we separate and as we work together.
I just have a question. It's this question from the assignment, where it says, "What question did the article leave in your mind?" So, what are some questions that you guys had while reading the article? You guys had any question?
Yeah, it's funny, but it's a really simple question, and like it's general. But what would you consider yourself as a race in this very moment, and where would you like to be? I don't know if you're, I don't know if that makes sense, but just like from reading this article, it's like pretty much just saying that race is not just a color, it's not your culture, it's not your physical aspect of you, but what would race be to you? I don't know. That was just something that I thought of as I was reading this article.
Yeah, it kind of leaves it open, doesn't it? It kind of breaks the ideologies behind it, but it doesn't really say like what the author would say race really is. It kind of leaves that up to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because it says like when you guys were explaining it at the beginning, it can be hair color, it can be eye color, it can be complexion, attitude, behavior, what you wear, what you're being labeled, or what you were born with. So it's totally yeah, it's totally up to you. How do you define race?
Right.
Could be any characteristic that can define you.
What were some questions that you guys came up with?
The question that I came up with this is when was the last time I experienced this racism going all over? Because I can't think of the last time that I can only think of is the experience that I shared with you guys, the school fights.
Yeah.
I was wondering when was the last time, like recently, that we had this. Or have I encountered any discrimination amongst the skin colors?
I think though the most I'd seen it was in high school. I don't think I mean, it's very general, and it can get, like Don was saying, it can get into the very minute details of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, it was in football, and it was in high school when I saw it the most up front. I don't know. Since then, I've been around a lot of different people of different races, and I don't know. It's not quite as hostile of an environment as high school was.
Yeah. Sure. I think for me, the last time I experienced racism was it's probably on my mission. On my mission, I served around a lot of, again, in a diverse culture. I served in Sacramento, California, and over there, there's tons of different cultures.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of different environments in Sacramento as well. And it wasn't necessarily race, but it was like neighborhood versus neighborhood that would be discriminating against each other. And the sad part is it could be the next street over that people were discriminating against each other. And to me, it was kind of like shocking, because it would be even people that were of the same culture, people that came from the same environment, but yet they just didn't like each other because of the street that they lived on. Almost like the similar situation with Benny back in Tonga with green versus red in the schools. It was just it was crazy to see that like people of their own culture discriminating against each other.
Yeah.
The streets.
Yep, the streets, man.
Yeah. I guess that kind of makes it even more broad scale of, it's not, maybe the issue isn't even just racism as much as it's just discrimination in general of, I guess you said the different neighborhoods, like what was the difference between them that made them kind of clash?
One neighborhood was just, they had their own clique that they liked hanging out with. And if any of them had like any hard feelings against another person that lived in a different neighborhood, then eventually they classified the whole neighborhood as that person as well. So that neighborhood would just automatically hate the other neighborhood because of just one person that acted a certain way towards that neighborhood.
Okay, so it's starting to come together a little bit of, people tend to stick around people that they feel that they have similarities between.
Right.
A lot of people, that might be the color of their skin.
Yeah.
For me in high school, it was football. I hung around the football players. And because of that, you stick around people that you have similarities with, and then you kind of alienate yourself from people that you might have differences with. The article, it kind of explained how, really we're all very similar. And so it's up to the person to kind of pick and choose what similarities they want to be around them and what differences they want to get away from. But in reality, we're all have a lot of the same similarities. But that kind of is what it sounds like to me, in that, between the different neighborhoods, they would stick around. They were similar in that way. It was their same neighborhood. Maybe they did stuff on the weekends together, and they were unified in their dislike of the culture of the other neighborhood. Same thing in football. I had my football team, and other people that didn't play football were just kind of in a different group in my mind. There were those that were the players, and then like the big fans that supported the team, and then there was everybody else kind of. And so I think race is involved in that, sometimes we stick around people of the same color or culture as us, but in a broader scale, it's just the difference between those that we stick around that have similarities and those that we pick out because of their differences.
That's pretty good. So with that, let's see. Were there any other questions that we needed to answer from our assignment?
So how does the author's definition of race differ from your previous conception of race? We kind of talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
What questions did the article leave behind? We talked about that.
Yeah.
What surprised you about the article?
I think we talked about that a little bit.
Bit.
Like I kind of shared my insights of what mind blew me. Were there any parts that surprised any of you guys about the article?
The only surprise that I got was how we define race, and how I used to define it as skin colors. It's all about your skin or your ethnicity. But now there's a lot more to it. There's behavior, attitude, what kind of clothes you wear, the sports you go to, your interest, similarities, differences. Just kind of.
I think what was interesting to me and kind of surprised me is just seeing how much like law and the government kind of plays into race. Because like with that court case, the law was that if you're black, you're a slave, right? More or less. And you couldn't just base that off of the color of their skin, but you had to go into all these other different rules and different aspects about a person. And so it was just interesting to see how much it affects the laws and how much it affects the government, when in reality it really shouldn't make a difference.
Man, it's sad how the government can be affected by it too. not only the people but the government can be affected by it.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to courts, because if you're a judge, your judge has to be just, be true. But as soon as you walked in, if the victim or they walked in, and then the judge is like racism, and then as soon as it's he's black, he's guilty anyway, regardless anything he said, or it doesn't matter if you say, even though if you're not guilty, but the judge make the decision if the judge is being affected by racism.
I think we see it even still. Like the article talked about that court case from a long time ago, but we even see it still today, and that there's a lot of controversy around police and African Americans right now.
Mm-hmm.
That whenever there's a shooting that involves,
I was actually going to bring that up.
What's that?
No, I agree with you. I was actually going to bring that up, like now when he was saying that. So
it seems like whenever there's any type of shooting of a police officer and an African American, people jump. The African Americans jump to defend, their brother,
mm-hmm.
and just because, whether it was just or not, and then in the same turn, the people who support the police, they jump to support the police officer, whether it was just or not. And so I think that just shows how, even more so than justice, people are really tied to, their ideology of race, even more so than just the right thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So, did you have other comments about that, Don?
No, I was just gonna. I 100% agree, and it's crazy how those controversies really affect our society as well, because not only is it affecting for an example, not only was it affecting the Black people's lives, but it's affecting our whole society, because we are now put in a situation where we're here to basically choose sides now, whether we are there to support the police officers, or whether we think that they're injustice, or whether we are supporting Black lives and the rights of the U.S. citizens. So,
and it just kind of affects everybody, even if they don't take a stance of which side that they support. Now say a job opening opens up in Ferguson, Missouri, there's that in the back of your mind of, do I really want to move there, even though there was tons of riots, and so there's just, it affects even just general safety of people, and that, regardless of who is right, who is wrong, there was a big controversy and there were riots there. So do I really want to put myself in that situation?
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Absolutely.
I think we're about wrapped up though, yeah?
Yeah, I think that brings to the conclusion of our discussion, man.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
sweet. All right, thanks guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for your insights as well.
Okay.
This learning experience.
Absolutely. All right, I'll cut it.